Her mother's last words were a whisper, barely audible over the hospital's sterile hum, "You're stronger than you know, Lila." But Lila, only 10, didn't feel strong. She felt like a shadow, slipping through life unnoticed, untouched, unloved. Her mother's death left her in a world of foster homes, where kind words were rare and hugs were non-existent. By 25, Lila had built a life in a small Ohio town, working at a diner, her heart a locked vault. She never knew what a hug felt like, not the kind that warms you from the inside, that says you're home. That is, until Henry, a silent widower with eyes like storm clouds, walked into her diner one rainy evening and changed everything. Lila's days were a blur of coffee pots and greasy plates at Mabel's Diner, a place where truckers and locals swapped stories under flickering fluorescent lights. She was efficient, her smile practiced but never reaching her eyes. Customers liked her well enough, but no one really knew her. She preferred it that way. Connection meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. Her childhood had taught her that. Foster homes had been a revolving door of indifference, some families kind but distracted, others cold and calculating. Physical affection was a foreign language, and Lila had learned to live without it. But the absence gnawed at her, a quiet ache she couldn't name. Henry was different from the regulars. He came in every Tuesday at 6 p.m., always alone, always ordering black coffee and a slice of pecan pie. He was in his late 60s, with silver hair and hands that trembled slightly when he lifted his cup. His silence wasn't rude, it was heavy, like he carried a lifetime of grief in his coat pockets. Lila noticed the way he stared at the empty seat across from him, as if waiting for someone who'd never show. She didn't pride diners were for eating, not soul-searching, but something about him tugged at her. Maybe it was the way his eyes softened when she refilled his coffee without him asking, or the way he left a generous tip despite his worn jacket. One evening, a storm rolled in, the kind that rattled windows and turned the sky to charcoal. The diner was nearly empty, save for Henry at his usual booth. Lila was wiping down the counter when the power flickered, plunging the room into darkness. A collective groan rose from the few patrons, but Henry didn't flinch. He just sat there, staring into his coffee like it held answers. Lila lit a few candles from the storage room, placing one on his table. "You okay?" she asked, her voice softer than usual. He looked up, startled, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "Just thinking about my Ellen," he said, his voice low and rough. It was the first time he'd spoken more than a food order. Lila hesitated, then slid into the booth across from him. "Your wife?" she asked, guessing from the way he'd said the name, like a prayer. Henry nodded. "Gone 3 years now. Cancer. We were married 42 years. His eyes glistened in the candlelight. "She loved storms. Said they made the world feel alive." Lila didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to this, people opening up, sharing pieces of themselves. But something about Henry's raw honesty made her want to listen. "I'm sorry," she said, and meant it. They talked until the power came back on, the diner's hum returning like a heartbeat. Henry told her about Ellen's laugh, how she'd sing off-key to old country songs, how she'd hug him every morning like it was the first day of their marriage. Lila listened, her chest tightening. She couldn't imagine that kind of love, that kind of touch. When Henry left that night, he thanked her, his voice steadier than before. "You're a good listener, Lila," he said. It was the first time anyone had said her name like it mattered. Over the next few weeks, Henry became a fixture in Lila's life. He still came every Tuesday, but now they talked about Ellen, about the diner, about the little things that made life bearable. Lila found herself looking forward to his visits, though she'd never admit it. But connection scared her. She'd built walls for a reason. What if Henry left, like everyone else had? What if she let herself care, only to be abandoned again? The first challenge came in the form of a letter. Lila found it in her mailbox one chilly morning, a notice from her landlord. The diner's rent was going up, and Mabel, the owner, was struggling to keep the place afloat. If they couldn't make ends meet, the diner would close by spring. Lila's stomach dropped. The diner wasn't just a job, it was her anchor, the closest thing she had to stability. She didn't tell Henry at first, she wasn't used to sharing her fears, but he noticed the strain in her eyes. "You're carrying something," he said one evening, cutting into his pie. "Spill it." She told him about the diner, the rent, the fear of losing the one place that felt like hers. Henry listened, his face unreadable. "We'll figure it out," he said simply, like it was a fact. Lila wanted to believe him, but doubt clung to her like damp clothes. Henry started coming in more often, not just for pie but to help. He'd fix a wobbly table, patch a leak in the roof, even talk to Mabel about small business loans. Lila watched, amazed, as this quiet man who'd seemed so broken became a force of quiet determination. But the bigger challenge was Lila herself. She wasn't used to help, to someone sticking around. Every time Henry showed up, her walls cracked a little more, and that terrified her. One night, after a particularly long shift, she snapped at him. "Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything." Henry didn't flinch. "Because you remind me of Ellen," he said. "Not in looks, but in heart. She had a way of holding the world at arm's length too. Took me years to get through to her. I see the same fight in you." Lila's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, to push him away, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she turned back to the counter, scrubbing it harder than necessary. Winter brought another challenge, Henry's health. He started coughing, a dry, persistent sound that worried Lila. He brushed it off, saying it was just a cold, but she saw the way he tired easily, the way his hands shook more than usual. She started slipping extra food onto his plate, soup, a sandwich, anything to keep him strong. He'd grumble but eat it, a small smile tugging at his lips. Their bond grew, unspoken but real, like a thread tying them together. The diner's fate hung over them like a storm cloud. Mabel organized a fundraiser, a community dinner to raise money. Lila threw herself into it, baking pies and decorating the diner with string lights. Henry was there every step, hauling chairs, hanging flyers, even convincing the local band to play for free. The night of the fundraiser, the diner was packed. Locals laughed and ate, kids ran around with sticky fingers, and for the first time, Lila felt like she belonged somewhere. The event raised enough to keep the diner open another few months, but it wasn't a permanent fix. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, the diner empty except for Lila and Henry. He'd stayed to help clean up after the fundraiser, despite his worsening cough. As they stacked chairs, he stopped, leaning heavily against a table. "Lila," he said, his voice hoarse, "I need to tell you something." Her heart sank. She knew that tone, the sound of bad news. "What is it?" she asked, bracing herself. "I went to the doctor. It's not just a cold. It's my lungs. They're not sure how long I've got." He said it plainly, like he was talking about the weather, but his eyes were soft, searching hers. Lila froze. The world tilted, and all she could think was that she was losing him, the one person who'd seen her, really seen her. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "You're fine. You have to be." Henry reached out, his hand steady despite the tremor. "Come here," he said. Before she could pull away, he wrapped his arms around her, pulling her into a hug. It was warm, strong, the kind of embrace that felt like safety, like love. Lila stiffened at first, her body unaccustomed to touch, but then she melted into it, tears streaming down her face. She'd never known what a hug felt like. "Not like this, not like home. I'm not going anywhere yet," Henry said, his voice muffled against her hair. "But you need to know you're not alone." Lila sobbed, years of loneliness pouring out. She clung to him, terrified of letting go. That hug broke something in her, but it also rebuilt her. For the first time, she understood what love could be, not grand gestures, but quiet, steady presence. Henry's health declined over the next few months, but he kept coming to the diner, kept fighting for it and for Lila. With his guidance, Mabel secured a loan, and the diner stayed open. Lila started opening up too, talking to customers, even laughing sometimes. Henry taught her to trust, to let people in. When he passed away that spring, Lila was devastated but not destroyed. At his funeral, she stood by his grave, whispering, "Thank you." She felt his hug still, a warmth she'd carry forever. Lila kept the diner running, pouring her heart into it. She started a weekly community night, a tribute to Henry, where people could share stories and feel connected. She'd learned that love wasn't just in grand moments but in the small ones, a shared coffee, a kind word, a hug that said you were enough. And every Tuesday, she set a slice of pecan pie at Henry's booth, A silent thank you to the man who taught her what love truly was. The story leaves its listeners with a message. Love doesn't always shout, sometimes it's a quiet embrace that changes everything. Open your heart, even when it scares you, because that's where home begins.